Can we have a public announcement, please?
Before we begin the agenda, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and the Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this public hearing. Copies of the agenda for today's meeting, the public hearing procedure, and Planning Department staff reports on all agenda items are available in the lobby of this conference room. The Planning Commission's and the BZA's bylaws limit the applicant on a zoning, subdivision, or variance application and his or her representative to a total of 10 minutes of speaking time at the start of the hearing on that item, plus up to 2 minutes at the conclusion of that hearing. All other persons wishing to speak on agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per person. However, if they feel that it is needed and justified, the chairman may extend these times by up to 2 minutes. All speakers are requested to state his or her name and address for the record when beginning to speak. When you are finished speaking, please write your name, address, and the case number on the sheet provided in the lobby. This will enable staff to notify you if there are any additional proceedings concerning that item. Please note that all written and visual materials you present to the Commission and the Board will be retained by the Secretary as part of the official record. If you are not speaking but you wish to be notified about future proceedings on a particular case, please sign in on that same sheet. The Planning Commission and the Board are interested in hearing the views of all persons who wish to express themselves on the agenda items. However, we ask that all speakers please be as concise as possible and avoid long repetitions of facts or opinions which have already been stated. For your information, the Wichita City Council has adopted a policy for all city zoning items. A copy of this policy is available in the lobby. The City Council relies on a written record of the Planning Commission hearings and does not conduct its own additional public hearings on these items. The decision of the BZA is final. Any appeal of a decision of the BZA is to district court.
Before we begin, one change that we'll institute today due to some problems we have with communications when we have votes. When everybody pushes their button at the same time, most of us get cut off, and so we'll start doing hand votes on each item so that we can get an accurate count on what's going on from that standpoint. First item of business is to approve the minutes of November 7th, 2019.
Move for approval.
Got a motion by Mr. Nix and approval by Mr. Green. All those in favor signify by showing a hand. Sign. Those that were abstaining, we have 2 abstaining. We're okay on that? Okay. Next, we will see which items we can take by consent. First will be the subdivision committee recommendations. Item 2.1, my understanding is that there's a staff would like to defer this, but the applicant would like to have it. So what I think we will do is that we will hear the item, and then if we don't feel like we have enough information, then we can defer at the end. So we will hear item 2.1 with the option to defer after we hear that item. Does anybody on the commission like to hear item 2.2, one-step final plat, Air Capital Office Park Edition? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience that wish to hear this item? Seeing none, we'll take that by consent. Item 2.3, one-step final plat for the St. Mark's Elementary School. Anybody on the commission want to hear that item? Seeing none, anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? We got one. We will hear item 2.3. Agenda item 2.4, one-step final plat, Kansas Surgery and Recovery Center, 2nd edition. Anybody from the commission want to hear that item? Seeing none, anybody in the audience want to hear that item? We'll take that by consent. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve 2.2 and 2.4.
Second.
motion by Mr. Blick. Who made the second? Mr. Hartman. All those in favor signify by showing right hand. Item passes unanimously. Okay. Vacation items. Item 3.1. Is there anybody from the commission wish to hear that item?
Mr. Chairman,
Johnson?
I've got to abstain from that
You
item.
abstain from that one? Okay. Anybody in the audience wish to hear vacation item 3.1, front building setback to allow buildings addition for property zone limited commercial or limited industrial? Okay, we will take 3.1 by consent. Is there a
Move for
motion?
approval.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Joe Johnson, second by Ms. Miles. All those in favor signify with the raised right hand. $11:01. No, we don't have to. We just all look at that. Yeah, Mr. McKay's been here long enough. He can choose whichever one he wishes. Now 13. Okay, public hearings. Item 4.1, conditional use for a permit for an accessory apartment. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none. Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? We'll take that. Item 4.2, city zone change from SF5, single family residential to a PUD planned unit development near 21st Street North, West 21st Street North. Anybody from the commission want to hear that item?
I had a staff question on that item.
Okay. We want to hear that one. We will hear item 4.2. Item 4.3 is a PUD, city zone from SF5 near South Woodlawn Boulevard. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none, anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? We won? Okay, we will hear item 4.3. Agenda item 4.4, city zone change from SF5 single family to a PUD, half mile east of South Ridge Road. Anybody from the commission wish to hear this item? Seeing none, anybody from the audience wish to hear this item? We will take that by consent. Item 4.5, city change from F5 to a non-resident neighborhood retail east of North Edgemore Drive. Anybody from the commission wish to hear that item?
I have a staff question on that item.
You have a staff question on that item, okay? Hear that item? Okay, we will hear that. Okay, item 4.6, city zone change. This is one that's been deferred to January the 9th. Item 4.7, the zone change, county zone change from rural residential to general commercial near North 143rd Street East. Anybody from the commission wish to hear that item? We will hear that item. Item 4.8, county zone change from rural residential to SF20 near North 183rd Street West. Anybody from the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience wish to hear this item? Seeing none, we will take that by consent. The last one in this section, 4.9, the city zone change from SF5 single family to office warehouse north of East Kellogg. Yeah, now it's working. Okay. No one wants to hear that. Anybody from the audience wish to hear that item? We will take that by consent.
Motion to approve 4.2, 4.3, 4.5, 4.8, and 4.9.
We have a motion by Mr. Blick. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so someone keeping track, is that in line with the ones that we will?
Chairman, I think the motion had 4.2, which I think was for hearing instead of.
Okay, so we're going to 4.1, 4.4, 4.8, 4.9, is that correct? Okay, all those in favor, raise the hand. Oh. Who was the second? Cindy Miles. Okay. That passed unanimously. Okay. Public hearings we need to hear, so there's nothing to do on that, right? Or do we need to vote on those?
Chairman?
Okay.
Well, two
Yes,
of these
Mr.
we were gonna hear, do they wanna hear it or they just got a couple questions?
We had audience members that wanted to
Oh.
hear. Yeah, my understanding, I believe so. Yes.
Good.
Motion by Mr. Johnson and a second by Mr. Dool to take item, which one is that, 4.7?
Yes.
Out of order, we will take that one first.
Might point out, 2.3 is also a county case.
Okay, let's do which one we had. We've made the motion on 4.7. We'll hear 4.7 right now. Who's got that? That's Philip. Fast on your feet.
Well, good afternoon. Philip Zievenbergen, Associate Planner with Planning Staff. Item 4.7 is a zone change and a request for a new community unit plan. The zone change would be a base zone of general commercial and establish the 21st and 143rd Commercial Community Unit Plan, which would be DP 351. The property is 16.2 acres at the northeast corner of East 21st Street North and North 143rd Street. It is currently zoned rural residential and is in Sedgwick County, and the property is unplatted. The applicant will be submitting a plat for approval by the Planning Commission in the future. The property abuts the city limits of Wichita to the west across 143rd Street, and you can see here on the aerial or the zoning map that there is city limits to the east as well, and it is expected that a request for annexation will be heard concurrently with, or be processed concurrently with the plat, although it is not required for this case. The text of the CUP states that all the uses in the CUP will be permitted by right in the LC Limited Commercial Zoning District on each parcels, with several exceptions, which I'm not going to go through at this time. The CUP also states that outdoor storage and display as permitted in general commercial will be allowed as an accessory use to an approved use in the CUP, although outdoor storage as a primary use will not be allowed, it'll be prohibited. When platted, the site will contain 7 parcels. There'll be 1 larger parcel here on the northern portion of the property and 6 smaller parcels, mostly along 21st Street and 1 along 143rd Street. The drawing shows, and it's hard to see on this, but there's full movement access drives on the 21st Street and 2 full movement access drives on 143rd Street. Staff does recommend access to the property be reduced to 2 full movement driveways, 1 for 143rd Street and 1 for 21st Street. In addition to 2 right-in, right-out drives along 21st Street, so there would be 1 on either side of the main drive. In addition to 1 right-in, right-out drive near the intersection of 143rd Street. So you'd have a full movement access on 143rd and an additional right-in, right-out near the intersection. All the parcels without access to the public street could be accessed through a cross-lot agreement. The proposed language of the general provisions also address permitted uses. The applicant is proposing screening along the north and the east line of the property that is less than the code requires when it abuts residential property. On the zoning map, the property is zoned rural residential. On the north and the east side is also zoned rural residential. And so they're proposing language that is not consistent with the code regarding commercial development related to abutting residential zoning districts. Staff recommends that the screening be provided to the full applicability of the code, and we can go into those details in just a second. Pretty standard language of the CUP requires architectural, landscaping, lighting, drainage, cross-lot circulation, and parking language. Landscaping in terms of like the street landscaping will be per the code. Light poles shall have a height restriction of 15 feet when located within 100 feet of residential zoning district. All rooftop mechanical equipment, trash receptacles, loading areas need to be reasonably screened, as well as dumpsters need to be screened within 150 feet of a street. Drainage on the site will be addressed during platting, and cross-lot circulation agreements for all the parcels will be provided at that time as well. Parking is per the code unless otherwise dictated in the CUP. Regarding signage, the proposed language in the CUP is not quite as beefed up as staff would like it. They only propose no portable banner or pennant signs, as well as window signage being limited to 25% of the window area. Staff recommends that there be further restrictions regarding the type, height, size, and which is consistent to other CUPs in the area. Primarily, we were looking at this CUP DP 302 that was approved in 2007 on the southwest corner. As I mentioned before, property on the north and the east sides are rural residential. On the north end is undeveloped property, but if you go further north, it's more large lot, single-family residential. Property to the east is currently undeveloped. However, there was a preliminary plat submitted in the development of the staff report for developing this property into a single-family residential subdivision. Property to the west is zoned single-family, SF5, and is a church. And if you go further west than that, you have single-family homes in SF5. And property to the south is zoned SF20 and is a large lot development or even undeveloped land. As I mentioned before, on the southwest corner is a CUP DP 302, which was approved in 2007, and is that CUP that we have been using as the measuring stick regarding the requirements that we're going to be requesting approval for today that differ from what the applicant proposed. There's no other case history on the site. All public utilities are available, however, they will need to be extended to this site through the platting process. 21st Street is a 5-lane arterial paved road. 143rd Street is a 2-lane paved arterial road. The intersection has recently been improved to include single left turn lanes in each direction. There is provision and guarantees in the CUP language that we are recommending, staff is recommending, regarding the improvement of 143rd Street to a commercial arterial, which also will be addressed at the time of platting. Regarding the comprehensive plan, this area is identified as residential employment mix, which encompasses areas that will be within the 2035 growth boundary, so they're going to be potentially be developed by then with a predominantly mixed nature. Regarding commercial development, it is stipulated in the code and the plan that those should occur at the intersection of 2 arterial streets. Overall, based on the information that was provided to staff, staff is requesting or recommending denial of the general commercial zoning district, but in its place, we're recommending approval of a limited commercial zoning district with the conditions that the development guidelines that you have in your staff report are approved, as well as the site obviously be then developed in substantial adherence to those conditions. Regarding the suitability of the property for the uses to which it has been restricted, it's zoned rural residential right now and could remain such. However, with the city being kind of on the east and the west side, it's logical to think that more intensive development, whether commercial or residential, is coming. Obviously, there has been a plat that's been submitted for the property to the east, looking to put in single-family homes in that area. So development is already starting to occur in the area. So this is not necessarily out of character for the area to be proposed for more intensive use at the corner. A general commercial zoning is not appropriate for the area for a base zone. It really doesn't fit sound reasoning to say you can allow outdoor storage as an accessory use to a limited commercial primary use as approved by the CUP. Staff recommends that the development standards of the approved CUP should be that for limited commercial, and those development guidelines should have a minimal negative impact on the surrounding area. I'm going to go through some details about the proposed language that you have. In the language that you have, anything that is struck through was language that the applicant proposed. Any language that is in red is staff recommended language to replace it. Overall, we have some clarifications on the setbacks. With an arterial setback, they requested 60, which is above and beyond the minimum of 35. So staff recommends that it say 35 or 60. We don't necessarily have to require them to be at a 35-foot setback since they're proposing a further setback away from the arterial road. I mentioned the thing about outdoor storage related to general commercial and limited commercial. Again, staff is recommending that all outdoor storage have to adhere to the limited commercial zoning district. The biggest difference between the two is that limited commercial requires screening of outdoor storage, and that storage has to be related to the sale and storage of merchandise that is available related to the specific use that is being stored for. Having no screening for outdoor storage, given the residential nature of the area, would be inappropriate. Moving on to General Provision 8E, talking about screening. Staff is recommending just for it to be saying that the screening on the east line will development in conformance to the code. All the other supplemental information that the applicant is proposing that would reduce what the code requires, staff is recommending to be removed. 8F, talking about screening not being required along the north property line. Staff is recommending that a screening wall along the north line be approved per the conformance to the code in section 3, C2B. If we go on to general provision number 10, talking about signage. 10B, adding language about no flashing, moving, or portable off-site banners, billboards, banners, or pendant signs. Adding provision C, that talks about having one sign along 21st Street and one sign along 143rd Street that can be 25 feet tall and have 150 square feet for development identification, in addition to other signs that can be 20 feet tall with 125 square feet. We recommend adding item D, which allows for 5 additional other monument signs along 21st Street for tenant use, as well as 6 signs along 143rd Street. Those would have to be spaced, all signs have to be spaced 150 feet apart. And the 5 and 6 signs would have a shared sign at the corner of the intersection if that's where one was deemed to be located. And then adding item E, that all sign face area freestanding signs along each arterial should not exceed 0.8 times the linear frontage of that arterial. If we move on to general provision 13, that is where staff recommended the language regarding the access control that I previously mentioned regarding reducing the amount of access control to one full movement drive on 143rd and 21st Street, and then those ride-in, ride-outs that I specified before. General provision 13E is an addition talking about the guarantees to improve on North 143rd Street to a commercial arterial. And then the final is adding just more language to the legal description that properly identifies there's a pipeline easement that runs diagonal, and that is the northern boundary of the side that just properly identifies where that pipeline is actually located. With that, I can stand for any staff questions.
Questions for Philip? Mr. Hartman?
Has this gone to the DEB?
No, this is in the county and does not go to the DAB.
Any additional questions? Okay, thank you. Agent or applicant, if you would come forward, you will have 10 minutes. State your name and address for the record, please.
Levi Bond with Caw Valley Engineering, 200 North Emporia, Suite 100, agent for the applicant on this case. I guess I'll split it up between the zoning and the CUP. The zoning request was for GC for the outdoor storage element of things. Philip's right about the screening, but also it limits the amount of outdoor storage you could have. So if there's ever a nursery or something that wanted to come in here and is over 10% of the floor area, then they wouldn't be able to do that, if I'm remembering my numbers correctly. Scott, feel free to hop in and correct me if I'm wrong on the area there. So our thought process was, why not have it GC as the base zoning to start, limit the CUP back to LC, and if uses ever pop up that would be technically GC but would be applicable to the area, then we would either amend the CUP or adjust the CUP and not have to go through another zone case. So that was the request for GC. We could see some of those uses coming up in this area eventually. And then to the CUP, generally in agreement with all of staff comment. Really, it's the commission's will on a lot of these. The ones that I'll bring up is recommendation for the language on the setbacks on number 2. We, the engineers and the developer, got together and recommended 60 feet just to make sure that the buildings were pushed back and no one was hogging the frontage in the development as these parcels got sold out or leased out and people weren't building up towards the frontage. Just to keep the sight lines and then kind of keep a uniform development overall. So I'd be pushing everything back towards the back of the property, and you have some parking out front, similar to other commercial situations. Then I talked briefly on condition number 4, by allowing the outdoor storage and display, mostly the display of items for sale of the GC district. It was more for the floor area and then how far out from the building it can be. So that's both more flexibility with the GC district. You're not limited to 10%. And then I can't remember the number of feet from the outside of the building. I think it's like 10 feet or something in LC where you have to keep it within a certain area from the building. So that's why we requested it that way. Of course, that would be based on having a base zoning of GC. If we didn't have that, we couldn't request it that way. And they do not have a tenant that requires it at this moment. If they did, we just have to come back in for a zone change and a CUP amendment. So that's the commission's will on number 4. I think the developer can go either way. And then the only other thing that I actually have some contention with is on the screening for AF. I would request that doesn't say screening wall, that it says solid screening. And to be approved by the director of planning. There's 100-foot gas pipeline easement up here in which, 50 and then 25 feet of setbacks on either side. So there's 100 feet of undevelopable land up here. And I don't know that we want to try to, we can't put a wall right on the edge because it's going to have foundations and footings. So then we're going to be losing another 25 feet coming off for the wall. So that's 8F. Just requested that say solid screening so we could just do a fence. And then other than that, in agreement with staff comments.
Questions from the applicants? Bye. Okay. Thank you very much. Open the floor to anybody from the audience that would like to speak on this issue. If you'd come forward, you would have state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
I think I went too far. My name's Nick Walker, 2402 North Springdale Circle, Wichita, Kansas 67228. I live in the Chestnut subdivision that's just diagonally opposite of the property in question for today. 3 major concerns. We have some other folks that want to speak, so I'll try to keep my comments brief. if multifamily is going to be part of this zoning change, we're very concerned about declining home prices. We have several single-family developments very close to this area, Chestnut Ridge and Garden Walker, two of those. In addition, there are multiple of these developments happening. You may have seen in the news just recently, the 21st and Andover Road, apartments going up there, multiple things happening here. Second concern would be safety. We mentioned 143rd already, and potentially some comments to bolster this road, but currently as it stands today, it's not a very safe road in my opinion. North of 21st Street, two-lane road, needs repairs, no sidewalk, no shoulder, no turn lane onto 143rd. And then lastly, just really about education about our children. The land in question is in Wichita city limits, but is in Andover School District, USD 385. The current bond that is still underway did add classroom space to several of the elementary schools very close. That space is already being used up quite a bit. School capacities and class sizes are at risk here with added growth. The current perspective from the school board was that we're not growing enough to necessitate new elementary, new middle school, new high school. But with this development, there would be more planning really needed here. That could mean redrawing of boundaries, which could impact multiple neighborhoods, and then other long-term items like a new middle school or a new high school. This is the maroon items in question here is the impacted district for those schools. So not only does it impact that area, but also an area down below as well. These are some of the neighborhoods that are impacted through development in the area. So in summary, declining home prices, safety of 143rd, and more long-term planning needed. And so the recommendation is that this would be denied at this time if multifamily is really one of the considerations for the zoning change. Thank you.
Any questions for the speaker? Mr. Richardson.
Maybe the staff could weigh in on the multifamily question, Scott, about whether or not that would be allowed.
Yeah, as proposed, it would be allowed, yes.
And that would be either in LC or GC zoning? It would be a right by
Either
use?
base zoning.
Either
that's
case,
correct.
is that right? Okay.
Additional questions? Thank you, sir. Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak on this issue? Please come to the microphone. You will have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record.
I was told I could hand out some papers.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Tracy Organ. I live at 2434 North Springdale Circle. I'll point to my house. One of the main things that I'm concerned about with this new development, especially the commercial component of it, is flooding issues. We have had some major flooding issues along 143rd. The drainage from the east side of the road flows over to the west side. It has flooded every basement on that street that you can see on the west side of 143rd. All of my neighbors' basements have been flooded. One of them, I believe, is still here who can attest to that. The first page of your handout shows very newly added floodplain areas right across the street from where this new development would be. There's one to the south and one to the east as well. But the one that would hurt our neighborhood the most is the one that's just to the west of 143rd. That just, all of those neighborhoods run right in that area. I am concerned about that. Another area of that, on 143rd, there are a lot of teenage drivers that would have a lot more traffic to deal with. I'm worried about decrease in our property values if we have commercial buildings right next to our neighborhood, right next to the church that has some land around it also. The condition of 143rd right now is terrible. If you turn to the last page, I'm sorry, the second to the last page of your handout, it's labeled as number 2. There was a fatal accident on 143rd that all of our children got to see. This man died wearing his seatbelt because of huge dips on 143rd. Excessive speed was definitely part of that, but those dips sent him airborne and he died. So we're concerned about that. We've already paid taxes. The people that live along 143rd on the west side have already paid taxes to have that road repaired. And we're still paying for it, and it's still in terrible condition. So I don't see that really getting any better. The other problem I have with this idea is that there has been a 20-acre commercial zone property across the street for sale for 12 years. I'll point to that. Right here. For 12 years,
Tracy,
that's been...
There is a mouse there that if you want to use it going forward.
Oh, that's okay. I see it now, but thank you. So that has been zoned commercial property for 12 years, and it's been sitting there empty with occasional Milo grown on it and harvested. There are lots of walkers, bikers, runners. We have a tree line, a hedgerow. I'll use my mouse now.
Your time has expired. How much more time?
Okay, 1 minute? Okay. There's a tree line. We all paid $22,000 for those lots that had trees in the back. So I'm worried too, if more development continues, especially commercial, that would destroy our tree line that we paid to have that there to provide us some shade and privacy from the street. My question would be too, if anyone knows this, if they're going to make 143rd an arterial street, which direction will that expansion go? I would just beg you not to go to the west if that happens. And then I also had a question about 6 proposed buildings along 21st Street. What are we talking about here as far as proposed commercial businesses there? So that's all.
Questions for the speaker? Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak on this issue? Seeing none, bring the applicant back up.
Good afternoon. So quick summary of questions brought up by the neighborhood. No, has not been expressed to me that multifamily is planned for this. This is a commercial, mostly retail, some service development. There is the possibility that might happen on one of these other tracks, but this portion that our client has brought to us, that has not been expressed at this point. The 143rd improvements, like Philip mentioned in his presentation, staff is going to strongly pursue those when we go to plat. We've already been told that for probably road widening and improvements of 143rd, so probably at least shoulders, if not another lane at that time. But that's going to get figured out with the city because we'll be participating with them on how we do that. The comments on education, like I said, we're not going to be doing multifamily. There shouldn't be any increases in your classrooms from this project, but you are going to have a whole new single-family subdivision coming in over here, and then I don't know what's going to happen with this track north of that gas pipeline. Running out of time here. So just quickly with the road improvements, it sounds like you're having overtopping issues from east to west. They'll probably be looked at when we design whatever improvements are required for this road. They'll be required by the plat. Same thing with 143rd being improved at that time. Though I'm sure they'll have some requirements for some time of plat, and we'll have to go through the city for design on everything. So hopefully that'll get improved. I don't foresee us trying to, I mean, we'll definitely try to avoid any trees we can. I don't foresee us having to take everything out for the road widening. I'm not sure how far north this project would go, if the city would participate to take this further north than our property, or if it's just going to be us to here. So obviously developer would want to minimize the cost and just widen close to the intersection and then whatever the city approves. So not trying to take out any extra trees. I know we like to preserve them when we can, so.
Levi, would the applicant be willing to for the CUP restricting multifamily housing?
They're not here today, and I always hate trying to pull that out of my hat. But I think we could, and if that need ever arose, we could always come in for an amendment if we had to. So,
additional questions for the speaker, Mr. McKay.
Sir, what, you said earlier in your presentation that you wanted general commercial and you're going to adhere to the light commercial. Why? What's the reasoning behind that?
So the CUP kind of acts like a big PO in this case to restrict it back from GC to LC. It allows us at the current as submitted CUP to have the outdoor display per the GC district. So that just allows you to have a little bit more area, and then it lets you have it a little bit further out from the building. So if there's ever, I don't think Lowe's is going to go in there, but as an example, Lowe's and Home Depot have to have some GC to have their stuff displayed outside, the equipment, because it's too far out from the building, or it's too much area for smaller businesses. So that's the thought process now. And then also by having GC in a limited back right now, say we ever have a use come in that technically has to be in the GC district, it wouldn't be allowed in the CP as we presented. But what we could do is just change the CUP and not have to rezone the whole parcel at that time. So it just kind of simplifies the steps in the future should we ever have a use.
Mr. Richardson?
Levi, do we know where is the street, 143rd, is it in the county or the city, or is it one of those that's split down the middle? Does anybody know that?
Here, and it's split down the middle.
It is.
I'm not sure. No, that's fine. If you know off the top of your head, do you have that boundary in here, Philip?
It appears
Yeah,
from
so-
that, it appears to be in the city. That red line is the city limits.
So I guess my comment would be that if this project is developed, it'd be more likely we get some improvements on 143rd, which in all likelihood would include storm drainage to help solve some of that water problem.
That'd be my guess as well.
The other question would be, and I'm sure you may not know, she talked about the hedge trees. Are those in the street right away, or are those on private property? Do we know?
From the GIS aerial, it looks like they are in the right of way, which we haven't done any survey out on that side of the road, so I couldn't tell you for sure.
Mr. McKay?
The reason I asked the question that I asked earlier was for the very reason you explained, that all they'd have to do if you got GC was to amend the CUP and it could go to change on a portion of it. I have a tendency to have a problem with that.
Additional questions? Mr. Foster?
Levi, on that pipeline easement, who's going to be responsible for maintaining that? Does your layout go north of that, or where does that north line hit?
So, Mr. Foster, on the property we have bought, there's a 25-foot setback. If I'm reading that right, it is a little light. So we have a 25-foot setback that we'll maintain, but the rest of the easement is on the property to the north of us, so it'll be their maintenance. So,
Mr. Nix?
It seemed to me that since that road split between the city and the county, that
I
it's
think
not,
Mr. Nix, looking at the aerial and where it has it shown, it seems like the entirety of the road is on that side. And then also we will be annexing this, so at least the area next to us will be brought into the city at that time, I'm sure.
You want to put the screen, the slide up that has the city limits. That red line that's shown there is the city limits. You can see that the road right-of-way is in the city limits.
All right. So do we have anybody here from city staff that can speak to the timing and improvement of that road, 143rd?
There's nothing in the capital improvement program that relates to improving 143rd Street, which is why staff has recommended that if the CUP is approved, that there be guarantees from this property to provide for their portion of the share of those improvements.
Thank you for that clarification. Additional questions for the speaker? Mr. Richardson.
So Scott, those guarantees would be a part of the community unit plan or part of the plating process?
Well, they'd be required by the community unit plan and would be established through the plating process.
Thank you.
Mr. Foster.
Levi, have you seen the diagram that the speaker presented to us in the handout?
No, I've not seen the handout. There's a chance I'd seen the diagram. One second.
It does indicate multifamily coming down in, to the area. Just curious if you could speak to that.
Mr. Foster, I am not sure where this came from. I've never seen this mock-up. It looks like it was sketched up using some sort of computer program, but this is not Caw Valley or what our developers told us. And if you look at it, the commercial shape doesn't even match the CUP that we have, and then the single-family residential doesn't even look like what's been purchased by the developer over here. So I cannot speak to what this is. I'd be happy to answer any more questions you have.
Mr. Richardson. Make a motion.
I would move that we approve subject staff comments with the elimination of the family as a use in the community unit plan.
We have a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I second that.
Mr. Hartman seconds the motion. Discussion of the motion. Mr. Foster.
Perhaps a question for everyone or Mr. Richardson. I'd be curious about that screening requirement relative to the wall. It's all on the south side of that easement. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I probably should have included that, not to include the wall, but to allow, Levi was a solid screen, is that?
Yeah, I would
or
recommend
a landscape buffer.
I would recommend solid screening to the approval of the planning department.
Okay, yeah, I would amend my motion to include that as opposed to a wall there. I'm sympathetic with the fact that we've got setbacks on both sides of that pipeline. In all likelihood, nobody's gonna build really close to the setback anyway.
So you amend the motion to include a
Yes.
solid screening rather than a,
Yes.
okay. Mr. Hartman, you concur? Okay, the
I
motion
do.
concurs.
Clarify, the chairman stated removing solid screening. I believe that's not the change.
To have solid screening and remove the wall requirement.
Additional discussion on the motion?
Can I have clarification of the
Yes, you
motion,
can.
please?
Okay. Who on staff's gonna make that attempt?
So the two changes would be, in addition to the changes that staff recommended, the uses would restrict multifamily, and then on section 8F, rather than requiring a screening wall, it would require solid screening, and then the section in the code that would apply is section 4 instead of section 3C. What that would allow then is screening by a fence rather than a wall, basically.
So this is to approve staff recommendation or the GC? Just the staff recommendation is LC? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Do not see any additional questions. Those in favor signify by the raised hand. Motion passes unanimously. We had one other item that required our staff attorney. What item was that?
2. 2.3.
Okay, we'll take item 2.3, what's that final plat, St. Mark's Elementary School?
Who had a question?
Hey, yeah, that was a good point. We had a question. Was there anybody in the audience that wanted to hear this item, or was there, I know we had a quick, we did? Okay, so we. Okay. Okay. Well, right now, we're at on 2.3 subdivision item 2019-00046.
And you're skipping, we also needed 2-1 to be pulled.
We'll
Do this first.
do 2.3 now, and then go back to 2.1.
All right, okay.
Do we need a motion? We made a motion on the earlier one, I thought. I don't know.
I didn't know about that.
Neil Straw, planning staff.
He knew what I meant.
Item 2-3 is the St. Mark's Elementary School addition. Property is located on the south side of 29th, west of 183rd. Encompasses one lot.
Thank you.
The zone changed from RR to SF20. I believe that was approved earlier today by consent. Access control is one item discussed at the subdivision meeting. The plat noted one opening along 29th Street, which County Public Works was okay with. However, the applicant mentioned the drive along the west needed to be kept open, so they were going to revise the access controls appropriately and discuss that with County Public Works. Also, originally there was a dedication along 29th required in lieu of the 10-foot dedication. County Public Works approved a 50-foot right-of-way per item I, along with a 10-foot utility easement. And the subdivision committee recommended approval of the plat. Questions for staff?
Questions for Neil? Seeing none, agent or applicant, please come to the podium. You'll have 10 minutes.
Good afternoon, Phil Meyer with Boffman Company, agent for the applicant. We're in agreement with staff comments as Neil presented. I think the gentleman, did you mention you had a question on zoning more than the plat or drainage or?
Sir, we'll need, let's kind of.
Okay, so I'm not sure exactly. The drainage plan is approved by the Sedgwick County Engineering Office, and for that, I'll stand for questions.
Any questions for Phil? Thank you, Phil. Sir, you have first crack here. You'll have 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
My name is Jan Strunk. I live at 18400 West 29th Street North. Yeah, I actually wanted to talk about the zoning change. That's part of this. I know you guys must have ruled consent on it. That was zoning 2019-00043. I really kind of wanted to speak to that because basically that, when you look at this, the drawing here, they want to rezone that and they're going to basically put it into a parking lot. Okay? Now, my concern is, parking lot is fine. Okay? But what I don't like about their drainage plan, I don't know, that apparently it's not up here, but all the water from this new parking lot is going to go into the ditch. Okay? And as that heads into the ditch, it goes to the north, and again, then it goes to the east, and then I was here 6 months ago. It runs through my property. Okay, They do have a detention pond, but the part they want to rezone, the water on that, from what I've seen on their drawings, is not going into the detention pond, it's going into the ditch. They're making the ditch a lot bigger.
Mr. Strunk, it really is difficult if you could speak into the microphone, that would really help us a bunch. I appreciate that.
Sorry.
You can use the mouse and the monitor. Let us know what you're pointing at.
Okay, all right, there we go. Okay, so, let me get my bearings here. Okay, so this is the part.
Staff, you guys want to help him show where that is?
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, your first time here.
Okay, so this part right here, this is the zoning change where they want to put the parking lot in. Okay, so all the water's gonna go out in the ditch. They've got a retention pond here. I know they've got some issues with flooding down in this area with these homes, but I don't think a solution to this problem is putting all the water into the ditch and then sending it on down the line and then letting, fellow neighbors, have to deal with it. Really, that's just my main contention.
Any questions for the speaker? Mr. Foster?
Explain a little bit further about where the ditch runs relative to your property.
Okay, so here's where the water goes. It goes down here, okay? It's about a third of a mile here. And then it comes right through here. And, the whole idea of retention ponds is supposed to slow the water down. Okay, what we've got here now is just a grass field, his yard. I don't have a problem with putting a parking lot in there, but, shouldn't that water go into a retention pond and slowly release so we don't have erosion down the line? So.
Does your property have some type of easement or reserve area that drainage goes across?
An easement, well, it's natural flow.
No, but on your plat or your lot itself, is that drainage allowed to go through there on paper, so to speak?
On paper, yes. But my contention is, they want to put a parking lot in. You're going to have less absorption, okay? And it's going to speed up the flow of the water.
Additional questions for the speaker? Thank you, sir. Before I go to other people from the audience, Phil, do you want to talk about what requirements you guys have in terms of drainage when you change a property from grass to, or maybe?
I'll address from my knowledge, I'll address what I can on this. The first, I guess, point of clarification, just so everybody in the audience knows, the zone change was for the entire parcel, not just the school district recently. The school district recently bought this lot right here. Our zone change is for the entire parcel, that it is zoned RR. We're trying to clean it up to SF20. We are expanding in here. There is a building addition going on at this point, and then we are doing a parking lot here. The natural grade of this property goes to the north. Some of this is draining out into the right-of-way of 29th Street and rolling to the east, and then as he mentioned, it goes through their property, which has been platted and has drainage dedications on it. Our drainage plan is reviewed and approved by the county engineer, so they have seen what we're doing there. And then we have been meeting with the neighbors here and are creating a little extra detention in this area to help ease some of the pains they've had over the years.
Okay, thank you. Additional speakers? Anybody else want to speak on this issue? Yes. Okay, go to the microphone, please.
Yes, my name is Leroy Kiter, and we live on the south side of the so-called change of the zoning. Now, today, as we speak, the parking lot is going in. I thought this was supposed to be planning. It's already happening today. They are laying the parking lot right now. They've got the ditches dug out now. So you guys have already changed this, right? It's all done. What he is talking about is holding pond, a retention pond. That water right now is not going to go north. That water, I don't know where it's going to go. In fact, it cannot go south because you're going uphill for a ways. So, you know, this whole thing is not done right. But today you are talking about it's already done, or you're going to pass it, but they're already working on it right now as we speak. So what's the purpose? I guess that's all.
Mr. Kyler, could you give us your address for the record, please?
2761 North, 183rd West.
Thank you. Anybody have a question for the speaker? Thank you, sir.
Okay, no answer on how come they're doing it today before it's even planned or passed?
We'll get to that in just a little bit.
All right.
Other speakers would like to speak on this issue? Seeing, Phil, do you need any more time for rebuttal?
I could help the planning commission with some answer to that last question. So we did not realize when we started this, or the architect did not realize that this was not zoned or platted properly. This school's been there, for those of you that know, a long time. So they've already been through plan review and building permits, and they're ready to pull a permit. One of our plan review comments was, it's not zoned properly, it's not platted, you have to do both to proceed. They are not building the parking lot at the moment, to my knowledge. May look like it, they are doing demolition. They have been doing demolition out there to do that, and upon approval of planning commission on the plat and zoning, they may be able to get a conditional building permit. They may not. We're gonna have to wait and see at that point in time.
Dale?
Phil, it's my understanding that when County Public Works reviews a drainage plan by policy, that the amount and rate of runoff cannot increase after it's developed than what it was pre-development. Is that an
Correct.
accurate-
Our requirement is to attain the difference between pre and post development.
So in terms of trying to address their concerns, if that's the case, then there shouldn't be more water coming off of this site after it's developed than what there is today.
Correct.
Any additional questions for the speaker? Thank you. Bring it back to the commission.
I see we're getting a question from one of the speakers. Mr. Kiter, what's your question, sir? Please come to the podium.
You have to ask him a question.
What's your question?
Okay.
My only comments to the engineer, I guess, is he apparently did not drive out there this morning. The underlayment for the parking lot is getting compacted right now. The retention ponds are all dug now. So, you know, he at least should drive out there before he talks.
Bring it back to the commission for action.
Sometimes you'd rather be. Sometimes you'd rather not.
I make a motion we approve subject to staff comments.
Second.
Motion by Mr. McKay, second by Mr. Bill Johnson. Any additional discussion?
Just confirmation
Mr.
that
Foster?
just confirmation that the drainage plan has been approved, correct?
That's correct.
That was my question.
Okay.
And so, in a nutshell, what happens to the water?
County Stormwater last week informed the subdivision committee that the additional impervious surface would be handled by a detention facility. I was informed today the drainage plan has been approved with that detention facility.
And where's that located?
I don't know.
It was explained to us.
Well, yeah, but how do you get there? That's what.
The detention facility is located at this location. We're digging a ditch along here to help pick up all this water that's been flowing through the neighborhood to bring into this. Mr. Johnson, I have not looked at the grading plan personally to address the area that's being brought up at the northeast corner. I'm not sure exactly to tell you.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify with a raised hand. Passes unanimously. Item 2.1, I think we're back on schedule. My understanding on this one is that staff wanted to defer this. The applicant wants to hear it, so if we feel like we do not have enough information, we do have the right to defer at the end of the hearing.
Okay, Neil Straw, planning staff. Item 2-1 is the Oliver edition. The little background, the one-step final plat was initially presented to the subdivision committee in October 17th. At that time, the drainage plan had not been submitted, and the subdivision committee did not have any other issues relative to the plat. However, they just only approved the preliminary plat at that time and said the final plat would be reviewed upon submission of the drainage plan. There was a drainage plan submitted last week to stormwater, and the subdivision committee approved the plat subject to approval of the drainage plan. I was informed at 10 a.m. this morning that the revised drainage plan had been submitted. There was some rerouting that had been required, and it had been submitted at 10 a.m. Did not give the stormwater engineer ample time to review, and stormwater was recommending the plat be deferred. We really have two options. Either you could defer the plat per staff comments, or you could approve the plat subject to the drainage plan being approved prior to city council consideration. Any questions for staff?
Any questions for Neil? Thank you, Neil. Agent or applicant? You know the drill.
Levi Bond with Caw Valley Engineering, 200 North Emporia, Suite 100. So the bulk of what Neil said is correct. That is kind of the timeline. Just, we still wanted to go ahead and speak to you guys today and kind of flesh out what's happened and how far we've come. Some things have changed since we first started. So as Neil said, in October, we had the first subdivision committee meeting. At that time, all this drainage was brought up to us. At that time, we were thinking we were doing the 10% rule, which we wouldn't have done a drainage plan for.
You need to speak in the microphone or speak up a little bit. We're having a hard time.
Let me move it just a little bit and let me know if I sound better. Is that good? Okay, so at that time, instead of going for the 10% rule, we instead just kind of held off on finalizing anything, and we went out to the site with Joe Hickel, kind of talked about some options if we did detain, and then we went to an HOA meeting with the neighborhood. At that time, we kind of presented a couple options, and then after that, I developed out the first full drainage plan, which Joe did review. That was modeled for one type of storm. He wanted me to go ahead and model it for a larger, bigger storm, just out of abundance of caution. So we went ahead and did that. That was last week when I got the comment that he wanted me to model it for the bigger storm on that last Thursday. So this Tuesday is when I met with him. I talked to him about all of the design side of it, all the criteria I was using. So we went over rainfall intensities, the types of soils, permeation rate, all of that, and then kind of the routing. And then all the calculations got done, and I submitted it to him this morning. It was close to 10, it was a little before 10 actually, but it doesn't really matter. I understand that Joe had to go home sick this morning, so he didn't get a chance to approve it. In that whole process, the amount of detention we went from was 0 when we were thinking about doing a 10% rule, and then, you know, we're willing to comply and we want to be good neighbors, and then we thought about, you know, around the 17,000 cubic feet range, and then right now on the plan I submitted to Joe is a little over 40,000. It's like 44,000 cubic feet. So we even just doubled it 2.5 times again because we feel like we could fit it in with the concepts that we've had. I do have some paper copies if you guys want to look at it, but like I said, Joe has not had the chance to approve it because he was gone, but he is in the middle of reviewing it. It's just waiting for his final approval. So our request is, because this has some real estate transactions with it, is that you'd go ahead and approve the final plat, but it can't go to city council until Joe puts his final seal of approval on it. And when I was emailing with him this morning, we think that before he does that, we'd like to just meet with the neighbors out on site one more time as well. So just kind of keeping you guys in the loop. Of course, you have your prerogative, but that's what we're requesting, is that you approve it, subject to Joe's final approval before city council.
Questions for Levi? Mr. Foster?
What type of detention are we talking about?
So it'll be dry detention, one cell. The larger of the two cells is going to be along the south property line with the piped outlets to an existing manhole and stormwater system here, and then emergency outflow. There'll be a graded swale back to this side and into the drainage way for anything larger than the 100-year.
And follow-up question, when you get up into the 40,000 plus on your containment there, what year of storm are you talking about?
So the way I have it modeled now and what Joe's reviewing, we're able to detain everything and release it at a slower rate, because it's all about rates when it comes to this. We're detaining it and having a slower release rate for everything up to the 100-year storm, which is all we model through typically. For the stormwater manual, you can design to any of them if you get approval, but you don't have to go over the 100 ever. So that's kind of how we had done it. So it completely detains, knocks down the runoff for the 100-year. And I forgot to mention, there's going to be a smaller detention pond on this side as well. It's a dry cell, so I shouldn't say pond. And that's going to have a pipe to make sure it stays dry, and then mostly a weir outlet to get it to go out here into this drainage reserve. So kind of split the side up.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Anybody from the audience wish to speak on this item? Please come forward to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes.
Name is Lonnie Barnes. I stay at 2924 North Terrace, Wichita, Kansas 67214. Appreciate it. And so I'm going to ask for my additional minute right now because I may need it, but I'll try and keep it all to this portion. So, so guys, before last time we met in here, I told you about this is where I live, right in here. And these are the apartments that they built over here. And this is Oliver going down here. And this is where we're talking about platting this here. And I know it's going to start there. But and I told you before, there's a city came in, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to work on our contributory creek that starts from Greenbrier up to here and goes along here and dumps into the main Chisholm Trail Creek. And so the pictures, if you'll recall, I showed you, even with all the things that the city did and the thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars they spent retaining walls to some degree with different elevations, but had open spots where it still went over the edges of it, and we're into our backyards with all the calculations and the math and the engineering that it should have contained it, it overran that as well. And so, is that me? Okay. All right, I'm missing one, but nevertheless. So guys, come back to this staff recommendations. A couple of things that goes from A to Z, A to W, and it talks a lot about the certification and guarantees that are required here for utilities and sidewalks and things of this nature in here. But when we get over here to item, item D, it says city stormwater management has approved the drainage plan.
That's incorrect.
Okay, that's what I got in the mail. Okay, they'd approved it, but what that said, what I'm saying here, guys, is there's with all the guarantees and certifications we require for utilities and everything else, there's nothing in here but this little insert or wherever there's going to be if there overflow here and does damage to our properties, no remedies for that as well. Now, guys, the part that kind of bothers me about this when I tell you that Chisholm Trail Creek is where it all stops, and that's toward the end down here, and it kind of winds down through here at the end of the block. And when I showed you the overflooding that was coming along here, when the city allowed this apartment complex to come in here and put this is the retaining pond that they put behind us and between that. This, at its probably deepest point, is only 2 foot deep in here. So unlike and everything contributory that end up dumping into Chisholm Trail Creek, from Fountain, from Terrace, on upstream up in here, they all contribute to it, and it ends there. And so when when this creek gets full, and I showed you that when it was full, it stops, so everything else bags up. And when we talk about retention ponds, when I say
Mr.
only 2
Barnes,
foot.
I'll give you your 1 minute.
Okay, good. I'm rushing. And so really quickly, when I show you this part in here, and it says that these things overrun, with all those calculations, and I can jump over here to S and T. It says, did we contact and like the Army Corps of Engineers and get their recommendations or things of this nature? Do we get any idea of permits that have been issued out further upstream? I was talking about Woodlawn and Harry, because anything that contributes to that creek that dumps down there, that may explain why we get in the overrun, even with the calculations they did here, because we're dumping more into the creek and it's full. And so I'm asking in due diligence that we look at this and we require all those things that come in. Unlike Wichita State, where their retention ponds also dump into our contributory, they're 8 to 10 foot deep. And the ones that they're going to, behind here again, is 2 foot deep. The ones they're going to put in are going to be 2 to 4 foot deep. And we're still going to have issues with everything that's coming downstream that contributes to that as well. So this is more for a point of matter of record keeping in here. I understand you guys are not, you're in for zoning, you're not into the portion here. But guys, it doesn't matter whether it's residential, whether it's retail, or the business has a woman swinging on the pole. If it floods, we're all in problems.
Mr. Barnes, your time has expired. Are there any questions for the speaker? Mr. Foster?
I just, sir, I want to compliment you for bringing to the subdivision committee the slides of the water flow, so we could readily see the issue you're talking about. And for those of you who did not get to see when the flooding is in full action, it is very dramatic what's happening to all those residents there.
Kind of like this, going to this.
Additional questions?
Okay.
All right. Okay. Anybody else in the audience wish to speak on this issue? Again, state your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes.
Brenda Stevenson, 4723 East 27th Street North, Wichita, Kansas. Levi gave us a great map today with the new floods, retention ponds on both sides. And my concern with the water is all this, come here, arrow, okay. This right here becomes so narrow and comes right up here to Greenbrier and Delrose, and it floods. This needs to be all cleaned out, and they're going to put water here and here into the creek. So another thing I want to say, okay, I live right here. This home right here just redid their driveway, the interior of the garage, and their back patio because of years of saturation of water that had soaked into this land. And it's now empty. They've moved. They gave up. But I think you've all heard time and again about all the Chisholm Creek, and they, of course, are draining in Chisholm Creek. And they say it's a 100-year flood plan. Well, that's what we need. And we want it developed so that it's, we can be through with this. So that's all I have to say.
Any questions for the speaker, Mr. Foster?
Do you carry flood insurance?
I don't. I haven't. The thing is, I'm the person with no basement. I'm the person not bailing water. The entire backyards, all the way, all these backyards flood anytime it rains. It comes up in my backyard. It comes down here in the street. And it hasn't rained a lot lately. It doesn't have to be much of a rain. So they are flowing water off into the narrowest part of the creek.
Additional questions? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the audience wish to speak on this issue? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the applicant for rebuttal.
First of all, just want to say thanks to Lonnie and Brenda for coming to all these and having their input. I think it's helped us develop the plans quite a bit. So to Lonnie's point, yes, these are not 8 to 10 foot deep like Wichita State, but this is not a development like Wichita State. Overall, we're using probably about 5% to 10% of the property to make these detention cells. We're doing the best we can, and for all of those 2 to 100-year storms, we're detaining more water than before. So I know that on the model that Joe has right now, that's what they have. I just saw him earlier and didn't want to have to bring that up because he hasn't improved it, but just wanted them to know. Yeah, and the model he has, we're knocking the 100-year storm down by over 4 cubic feet per second. Like, we're trying to contain this thing, and then all of the emergency outflows are designed such that they're going to come back onto our property, then flow out. So we're trying not to damage any property near us. So that'll all be fleshed out when you have full design plans, but that is how it is now. And then just quickly a reminder that yes, we need to get this drainage plan done, but we've went through a lot of steps, and Joe has reviewed quite a bit. And ultimately, this is a technical issue. And ultimately, Joe's going to approve it one way or another for the design. And it's not really subject to what's going on here. So we'd still like to get the approval here so that they can go ahead and close on the property, but not allow them to go to city council until that's finished, because they're just needing this step to be done.
Any questions for the speaker? Mr. McKay?
When earlier in your presentation, you said you had designed it one way and then you went to another type of design, the 100-year flood. Have you taken into consideration the 500-year flood and in any projections, what the change might be and what the effects might be?
No, so the City of Wichita Stormwater Manual has this design for detention up to 100 years, so that is what we modeled. With the 500 year, we'll just make sure that we have correct swales, if you will, drainage pathways to get it back over into this flooding area, because we can't dump out into the streets and we don't want to dump out onto anyone else's property. So
The only thing is, if you do the 100-year flood, you do the 500-year flood and it changes dramatically what's happening around you. That's
correct.
happened throughout this city, especially in small creek areas out on the west side and over in this area also. They've gone from 100-year to 500-year just simply to help out with the existing neighborhoods.
They've designed for the 500 year?
Yes.
I haven't heard of any of my peers doing that. I'm sorry, Mr. K, but the stormwater manual is for the 100 year. And, just as a reminder, this site it just screams the 10% rule. This is at the bottom of a large basin. Theoretically, we shouldn't even have to detain at all. So we're just trying to do as much as we can to be good neighbors, and we figure we can fit it into the site and then use some of that for fill. The 500-year storm, it's not anything I've worked on and anything I've seen anyone else work on. We haven't had to detain it. But I will say that if we do have one, the 100-year storm's volume, that all gets detained at that point. So a good portion of the 500-year storm gets detained, and then everything thereafter is going to be routed to get it away from property so there's no damage.
All I'm asking, you've done the calculations for the 100-year flood.
Correct.
Would you resist doing calculations for the 500-year flood so we can see what the results might be?
If Joe would like that from us, we could do it. I wouldn't say that we had designed to it because that's substantially much bigger ponds. And then we're starting to getting into the developer's pro forma and them not being able to build out even 3/4 of the units. But we can see what happens if you guys would like to make that a requirement that Joe has that modeled by us.
That was my point, what you just said.
What's that?
You might have to have larger retention ponds. You might have to make it safer for the people that's already existing there.
So,
because your company's never done it before doesn't mean it hasn't been done.
I guess the question is should we do the 1,000 year 2 and then the 2,000? We're just going off of what's set forth to us by the stormwater manual. And in that, we're already trying to even retain more than that. So we're already over retaining for the 100 year, the 50 year, and the 25 year. And I can run the calculations for you, but I can't commit to doing that on this site because then there will be major financial implications for the person who's about to buy it. They're not going to be able to develop it out, and they won't make their money back. There will be a hardship issue at that point if we detained the whole 500-year storm.
Just for the speaker, Mr. Foster.
On your post-construction release, which year of modeling was that? 100? So that your post-construction release does not exceed.
It will not exceed, I have it modeled for the 2, 5, 10, no, 2, 5, 25, no, 2, 5, 10, 25, and 100 year. All of them will not exceed the pre-development condition. We have it modeled to where they all meet the standards.
Any more questions? If not, I'll bring it back to the committee for action.
I move that we approve, per approval of the drainage plan. Thank you, subject to the approval of the drainage plan.
We have a motion to approve, subject to approval of the drainage plan before it goes to city council. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Blick. Further discussion? Mr. Foster?
I just provide a comment. You know, I think this one is important enough as to whether we feel the subdivision committee has done their full due diligence on this particular item. And I'm curious about even the 500-year examination, because there's so many instances in this city where the engineering piece has failed in terms of not meeting the flood. So, I mean, what Mr. McKay mentioned, I think might be appropriate in terms of analysis. Final thought would be is I have full confidence in Joe Hickle. He's sharp at what he does, so I'm for the motion, but would like some further discussion on the 500-year analysis.
Additional comments? Seeing none, I'll bring it to a vote. Those in favor of the motion show by raised hand. One opposition. 12-1. Thank you. Okay. What item are we on? 2 point. Let's stand. Mr. Richardson.
Well, I think Mr. McKay brings up a good point, which is, you know, the underlying question here is the 100-year drainage the right one? And, you know, we see lots of floods in lots of places these days that kind of blow right past the 100-year, and we've had, Joe will tell you, we've had several of those in the past few years. But that's a whole policy question that I think we would have I don't know whether that discussion starts with the subdivision committee or where that starts with, but you know, I think we ought to at least talk about it.
I agree. It's one of those deals, we can't cherry pick on a case-by-case basis. Either we change the policy for everybody or we don't change it for anybody. It's one of those deals that, you know, if we need to take a look at a major, but that'd be a major policy change on how we do things. And so it's a big ask, so.
One other is that a lot of this area was developed years and years before the city had any requirements for stormwater retention. Is the real reason these places flood is that, you know, in 1920 or whenever this was platted, some of this, it was just whoever's downstream gets your water. And unfortunately, that happens in lots of areas of this city because we didn't have this retention in place when these things were platted at that time.
Near as I can tell, we are on agenda item 4.2. Is that where you're at, Philip?
Yes, sir.
Let's go.
Again, Philip Zievenbergen, Associate Planner, Planning Staff. Item 4.2 is PUD 2913. The applicant is seeking to establish the DOBA development PUD, which would be PUD 68 in the city system, for a 3-acre tract of land that is located about a quarter mile south of West 21st Street North and about 450 feet west of North Mays Road. So if you're not familiar with the area, just north of 21st here is where Walmart is in New Market Square. Dillon's is over here on the northeast corner of that. So we're looking at, this is Pathway Church. And there's a dental and orthodontic office located here at the entrance to this property, recessed back and kind of landlocked behind the properties. The property is currently zoned single-family SF5. The property contains several buildings and storage areas utilized by the current uses. You can see on the aerial kind of what those buildings are and where they're located throughout the site. The applicant has indicated that the intent of this PUD is to accommodate the existing commercial uses and permit some additional uses in the future. The site currently houses a pet waste removal business, a vehicle repair and refurbishment business, which refurbishes primarily golf carts. They also work on some of the party buses, and a construction business, outdoor storage business, and outdoor storage of personal property. A detailed description of those is in the general provisions or in the language of the PUD that is attached to your staff report. The proposed screening, landscape buffer, and setbacks for all the property lines reflect that all the properties around this are zoned residential. I get the zoning map, yep. And all of those things, when put in place, should diminish the negative impacts that this site would have on the surrounding properties. You'll know as we go through these descriptions, a lot of the restrictions vary. The north and the west sides have less restrictions on them than the south and the east sides. As you can see, on the north and the west side, it's all the property owned by the church and, abutting the expansive parking area as well as just undeveloped land that the church owns, versus the south and the east side are all developed with single-family residences that are much closer in proximity to the actual uses and to the property lines as well. With that in mind, all 4 property lines will require a 6-foot screening fence, a landscape buffer on the south, so on the south and the east sides will consist of a mix of evergreen trees and deciduous trees spaced 30 feet apart. And then the landscape buffer on the north and the west sides will be the same mix of evergreen and deciduous trees spaced 40 feet apart. With the setbacks, along the south side, there's a 35-foot building setback. On the east side, there's a 30-foot setback. But then on the north and the west sides, we're only going to be requiring a 10-foot building setback. It is understood that with a 30-foot setback here on the east side, that this small office building right here, which is an old house that was kind of converted into an office, encroaches into that setback. We are aware of that. However, this larger building does not encroach into that 30-foot setback. The provisions of the PUD state that with an approved site plan, this eastern setback line could be reduced to 15 feet to accommodate a future use. That site plan would have to be submitted to planning ahead of time, and we'd have to approve it before anything would be able to happen. If the approved use is in the PUD, it would not require an amendment. Obviously, if they're going to be introducing a new use into the PUD, at that point, it would require an amendment to the PUD. As I mentioned before, all the properties surrounding this are zoned single-family residential. We kind of went over what the uses are already. These properties here directly along Mays Road are neighborhood office, and I mentioned they're a dentist and orthodontic office, respectively. There's a little bit of case history on this site. There was a conditional use, which is CU 156, that was approved in 1974 to allow a metal agricultural storage building to store products, crop, as well as equipment on the site. The conditional use became invalid in 2017 when the property changed hands and a new owner took over of the land. In 2005 and in 2009, respectively, 2 separate zone cases were filed. The first one was for a PUD, second one was for neighborhood office, and both were approved by City Council with a 1-year platting requirement. The property was never platted, and so the zoning was never perfected. This zone change, staff is not recommending a time limit for platting, so that shouldn't necessarily be the case in this time frame. However, if a new building were to be constructed and a building permit needs to be pulled, before they could do that, they would have to plat the property. The property has access to all public services, and it has access to Mays Road via an access easement or an access agreement. Mays Road is a 5-lane paved arterial road. Regarding the comprehensive plan, this site is identified for new employment, which can be described as centers of concentration for manufacturing, warehousing, distribution, construction, research, technology, business services, and corporate offices. So it's in line with the comprehensive plan. We feel that the PUD does meet those requirements. Staff is recommending approval of this PUD, subject to the two conditions that are pretty standard regarding the recording of certain certificates with the Register of Deeds and providing staff with the necessary copies of the drawing. We already talked about the suitability of the neighborhood. If the property were to be retained as an SF5 zoning district, it'd be very hard to redevelop this property for single-family uses. So we feel this PUD is reasonable, considering that the PUD does contain language for additional residential uses, anywhere from duplexes to multifamily, could make it actually easier to redevelop it if it were to be redeveloped in the future for residential uses. So to have it retain single-family residential seems actually fairly restrictive and more unreasonable for future redevelopment of the site. Regarding the rezoning to PUD with the language for screening, landscape buffers, and setbacks, we feel that those will minimize the detrimental impacts to the neighboring properties. As I mentioned, we feel it is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. And based on the community facilities available in the area, it should not provide any extra burden on that. Regarding the development language or the development guidelines of the PUD, in a conversation just prior to this meeting with the agent, and he can go into more detail with this as well, he mentioned that the church spoke with them and had concerns regarding a specific use for dry cleaning that's under personal care services, and they were looking to amend the language to not allow dry cleaning on the site. So that would have to be an amendment to the language that's presented for you today. He did mention one other thing, and I apologize, I've got it, but he'll take care of it when he gets up here to speak. Just wanted to note a couple things regarding signage. Obviously, the site is currently non-residential uses. Signs will be permitted under the neighborhood office as opposed to the office warehouse, which is what this PUD is generally conforming to. Those building signs are for tenant identification, and they could only be on the west and south elevations and cannot exceed 32 square feet and cannot be any taller than 10 feet off the ground. And regarding drainage, since it was a topic today, a drainage plan would be submitted to the city of Wichita for approval. Overall, as I mentioned, the general provisions state that all uses are permitted in OW. There are a list of uses that are accepted to that, in addition to the allowance of several residential options, in addition to church and place of worship, parking area and accessory drive, vehicle equipment sales and outdoor, vehicle equipment sales outdoor, vehicle repair limited in general, and outdoor rental and sales equipment. If the outdoor vehicle sales as well as the outdoor rental and sales equipment were to develop in the future, they would be restricted to the area of the site that you see here in the dashed box, kind of on the north and the west side, which take it furthest away from the residential uses that are around the property. I always forget to do this on my cases. I do have some pictures going through. So this is, if you just drive into the property, looking to the northwest, that is that office building that I talked about that would be encroaching into the setback. This primary structure here is utilized for the refurbishment business of the golf carts and the party buses. You can see the building in the back. And Brian, when we get up here, correct me if I'm wrong if I get some of these uses wrong. I believe is the storage for personal property. This is looking at the residences that are east of the property. So here's our office building. Here's already a partial screening fence. They would have to continue it further north. So this is not on property, but it's the one that are directly to the east. Brian will get into a bit of the history, but this residential property actually at one point in time was part of this property, and it was sold off at some point in time. I'm on the southwest corner of the property, kind of looking to the northeast. So there's that building that's with the refurbishment. You can see that some of the vehicles are outside. They primarily are only stored outside as they're in queue waiting to be refurbished. This is on the north property line looking south at the single family homes, their backyards. You can see that some of the screening will have to be updated to maintain that fence. And obviously there'll be the landscape buffering that will be installed in the future. This is looking outside the property. I'm on the Pathway Church property looking kind of to the southwest. Here's that building where the personal storage is, and you can see just kind of the undeveloped nature of the property to the west of it. This is looking to the east. This is where I said that screening fence would have to be improved.